Welcome, everyone, to another poorly prepped episode of a NonPro TV Party recap of The Strain, our summer series. Hooray, everyone! Let's do a quick roundhouse roll call. I'm Frank. I'm joined not at all in studio by, I believe, James is here. Say hi, James.
Hey, guys.
Ken is here.
Hey.
And Matt.
Howdy.
All right, so we've got 4 people who've promised you that they've watched this show. The Strain is, we're only on the 2nd episode. Tonight we'll premiere the 3rd episode, and it's already kind of a strain to get any details on it. It's very much a summer show where there's like not a lot of buzz, not a lot of press about it. It seems like everyone's on vacation, and it's hard to find details about any of the things that's going on. However, I am very much digging this show. I really do enjoy it. 2nd episode was light years beyond the first because of the couple of really cool character scenes which I felt were lacking in the 1st episode. So just as a blanket reaction, what did you guys think? Everyone can give me a sentence of what they thought of the 2nd episode.
Lost in not enough character development yet to really get what's going on.
Really?
A little bit, yeah.
How about you, Matt?
Curious to see where this is going. I feel like it's building up to something, and I guess I'm willing to see where it turns out, but like I'm not way too impressed at the moment, but I can see that I think it's building up to something pretty cool, so I want to stick with it.
James, you haven't been on one of these hangouts yet, so what do you think of the show overall?
I haven't been disliking the show. I'm enjoying it so far. The 1st episode to me, I felt like Del Toro was really excited to be doing the show, so we had a ton of different things directorially he did in there. He tried to do a lot of stuff with all his different horror genres and expertise. It gave me a little bit of a fatigue, and I'm hopeful I could really use a little bit more vampire in what I thought was a story about a vampire plague. Got a lot of people, not a lot of vampire for me.
See,
so.
I know that it seems like everyone's kind of iffy and maybe just waiting it out. I definitely felt that the 1st episode where there was just a dump of characters, but I did feel like we got a couple of interesting windows into characters on the 2nd episode, which is pretty impressive. I mean, it's only the 2nd episode of a show. So
yeah.
Let's go right into I guess everyone. Do we want to we'll do a quick recap. Basically, in this episode, 1st episode, we had an airplane crash, land mysteriously with most of the passengers and crew dead. The CDC is called in, and we have some unlovable characters in the form of our main doctors from the CDC who believe this is some sort of viral or parasitic outbreak and must be investigated. Meanwhile, there is an evil organization, possibly of 2 or 3 people, but evil because they have got evil co-names that are out there apparently moving pawns around to get a gigantic coffin to smuggle it into the United States so that a really rich guy can possibly get extended vampire life. Not really sure what's going on, but we get the beats, and that's pretty much it. In this episode, we get a little bit more of how evil Evil Co. is. Pretty evil. They go out and kill people just in case you need some backup organs. That was messed up. And we get a little bit more background on why Ephraim is such an unlovable character. It's like they sort of cut off most of his family, so it's less of an issue. And we get introduced to a character who might be really cool, perhaps. He's a health inspector that we don't know much about yet. And in my opinion, the most important thing about this episode is we get to see some Abraham badassery, which I loved.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So, anybody want to take it? Anybody have any points they want to bring up, especially?
I want to bring up the new character, Vasily Fett. Interesting name. But he's her health inspector who apparently plays by his own rules and does whatever.
Yeah, you don't necessarily expect that from a health inspector.
No, but
I was
Ken?
gonna say,
Yeah.
I'd almost go as far to say, I don't think he's a real health inspector.
It's
Well,
possible, yeah.
it doesn't look like it when you get introduced. You get like this like dingy like workshop where he's, I guess, I don't know. It looks like he's like mixing with like poison and stuff. I originally thought it was like some kind of like, is somebody like, is this like Evil Co's like super assassin or something like that? But no, he's just a New York health inspector. But then he goes into the restaurant and starts well, clears everybody out pretty fast. So I'm curious to see where he's going to be brought into the main story. I don't think he really has much of a connection, if at all, to what's going on at the moment. But I mean, he seems pretty cool, and the actor,
Kevin Durand.
He's a industry veteran, so.
Yeah, he's a pretty interesting character actor. He's played a lot of, like, I knew him most from the first 15 minutes of Wolverine's Wolverine's origin, or X-Men Origins Wolverine, where he played the Blob in a very cool way, and then later on in the movie when he appears as the Blob. So he's interesting. He's got a lot of like funny action roles, and he's a good thug. It seems like he's a little bit more than that in this show, but yeah, we don't know much about him at all, other than he's a Catman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Anybody else got a thing that you want to bring up in particular? I kind of want to talk about F and how unlovable of a character he is. Ephraim,
Yeah, I don't know.
Go on.
No, so I don't know whether we are supposed to sympathize with him or not. I mean, we know that he's the lead and the quote-unquote hero of this show, but it looks like he's got some interesting morals and ethics when it comes to his home life.
Yeah, what I remember remarking on in the first episode was that we, effectively, in any genre show, you want to feel for the characters, right? You want to care about the characters, not the meta plot. And I could not care less about these people. They're just like, it was just an awful life. It's kind of this grim, dark, miserable. I mean, sort of grim dark. It's just like their life is going through hell. They're going through a divorce. It just seems really bad. And I feel like this episode we got a little bit more of an idea of why things are so miserable at home for F. And more importantly, I think he had like a little redeeming scene when he kind of shook hands and hugged his wife's boyfriend.
If you want to call it redeeming.
I think it's this is how I saw it as redeeming. It kind of put a period at a very uninteresting point. Like at least now I can see like, all right, he has an ex-wife effectively. He has a son he cares about. He's a workaholic, and there's a guy in his ex-wife's life who's actually a pretty decent guy. That package, that character trope, I can deal with. It was weird having it all dumped on us in like 30 seconds as the beginning of the show. Now that it's just been established, I'm okay with it.
And ultimately, he'll miss the hearing for custody of his kids because he's dealing with this giant CDC outbreak, and we're supposed to feel for him through that.
Yeah, and I could totally deal with that. It's weird that we experienced like the Batman Begins of that character. This is how he became the modern day like Ebenezer Scrooge. Family Man. There's that one Adam Sandler movie where like he works too hard and he's a bad father. That character trope, that I work too hard and I'm a bad father. I'm away from my family. I get it. It's fine. I can run with it. It's just weird that we had to see it develop in an episode.
I think my only concern, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I don't want to waste too much time on the relationship that F has, but in the first episode, it just seemed like in the very beginning, the whole point was they were going to counseling to fix their marriage. He didn't want to announce that their marriage was done. And then by the second episode, the new boyfriend's already moved in, and they're talking about custody.
Yeah. Yeah, it really was sudden. The relationship should have just been at the second episode. We're like, all right, this guy has a broken marriage. I don't know why they did it this way. Maybe in the books the relationship is more developed, or maybe they plan on revisiting. Maybe the boyfriend's going to become a vampire. I don't really know. But, that was one of those characters that I really didn't care much for, and I'm happy they kind of nipped that in the bud, it seemed like, in the second episode. The alternative, and I'll let somebody else go if they have a character that they want to talk about, I want to just describe Abraham for a little bit.
Go for it.
Abraham awesome character. I loved him. In the first episode, he was kind of cool, you know, badass pawn dealer, fine. But the thing that sold it for me in the second episode, when he and what is the evil guy's name? The evil henchman. I think his name is. Hold on a minute. I have it. Copy. Icarus? Is that really his name? Icarus? All right. Yeah.
Icarus, yeah.
Yeah. So Icarus, who is the undead like minion of the master, this big evil thing that we haven't really seen, other than the fact that he's a big evil thing with a proboscis mouth, whatever.
And he crushes people's heads.
Yes, pretty severely. Icarus, whatever, and Abraham have a scene where this undead zombie Nazi thing is saying, so, we're really impressed that you managed to stay alive for so long. And Abraham, the way he ends that scene, when he's saying, hey, you know how that partner of yours isn't around to celebrate your victory? It's because I scattered his ashes over the North Sea like I'm going to do with you. And it was just freaking awesome. I loved it.
It wasn't even ashes. It was actual body parts. He said that he lopped off parts of his body and dropped them all over the place.
That's pretty awesome. And it was the delivery, it's the acting, it's the back and forth between the two of them. That kind of stuff. If the show is all that, I'm in for the long run.
Very much shades of X-Men gone horribly wrong with those two characters.
That's right. Yeah, I could see that. Like there's this old rivalry there, and I think it's pretty cool. Just as a blanket thing, and I guess anybody else have a character moment that they want to talk about before we move on?
Actually, I'll jump in. I think the character that I associated the most with was the character of Gus, the driver in the beginning of the episode. The Latino who's taking care of his mom, who pretty much beat the hell out of his brother for abusing his mom's finances while I guess he was locked up.
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody, out of all of them, it's the criminal that I think has the stronger code of ethics and morals in this show so far.
Yeah, he also has like a really bad opening entry, like in the first episode, but in this episode he seems a little bit more interesting. The fact that he beat his brother for like, I like the callback of stealing the clock from Abraham.
Yeah, that was a neat connection.
It's an interesting little connection between those characters. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I think it's interesting.
I liked
Yeah, James?
I like that we started to see the symptoms develop. I mean, they're not so much characters, but are kind of our victims from the first episode. We kind of come back to them and we get to see the symptoms starting to develop. I'm excited about the vampire angle. I want to see more of that. I mean, I might have been able to do without the goth orgy, but overall.
Yeah. So, all right, characters are important for these kinds of shows, but let's talk about the meta plot. There are two things that I really enjoy in this. One, it's the coffin and the running water vampire motif that we don't generally see too much in modern day vampire stories. So this is very much a vampire story about, like, you know, a viral vampire story, a parasitic vampire story, which is relatively new, but we've got a lot of callbacks to, you know, must sleep in a coffin or have native soil and can't cross running water, the entire Dracula on a boat motif. The other thing I want to talk about is the whole aspect we kind of missed in our first review was the love being the most potent power in the universe, but really it works to unravel us. And I didn't even really think about it, to be blunt, in the first episode, but by the second episode I realized, oh, that's not just poetry that's being slung at us, that's real in this show. That's an actual problem. Love is really dangerous. So let's talk about the vampires crossing running water. So,
well, actually, I'm going to ask you to go back with the whole love aspect and give me some examples of that.
Screw you! I want to talk about vampires crossing running water first. No, I don't. All right. Love.
I don't actually.
What's causing? So here's the big thing. It ends the first episode with love being. It actually opens the episode and ends it. That love is kind of a powerful, dangerous force. I think the people who are infected with vampirism have got something inside them that makes them reach out to the people they love. That's why the little girl goes back to daddy. And in fact, just in nature, this is like guerrilla warfare. This is, disease and the way how horrific it is that we care for our sick. And because we didn't like nuke it from orbit, because we didn't blow the plane up, because we actually tried to help them, it's how this infection is getting into our backyard. This is how it's affecting us. And obviously, most definitely from the little girl and her father, where he literally, in this episode, succumbs to her because she feeds on him. She rips him apart. And it's love that is absolutely a bad thing in this universe. It is putting us in danger. It is making us prey for this parasite. And I think that's awful and awesome. That's really good.
Okay. Get on to the vampirism.
I was going to say, I don't know the origin of the running water thing, if someone could school me really quickly.
I don't know what the mythological origin is. I suspect it's just about purity. Vampirism has this traditional, like, it's unclean bodies and corpses and the spreading. But it has always been a big part of most vampire myths. Vampires can't cross running water. And it's a big plot point in Dracula. That's how Dracula gets from Transylvania to London. His coffin is in a ship, and he preys on all the people in the ship slowly as he makes the journey. But he has to be taken. He can't just go there. And this is kind of like a modern retelling of it, which is awesome. I mean, you've got the coffin or the cabinet, the box in this episode is full of soil that has all these little weird worms in it, these parasitic vampiric things that make you into a vampire. It's obviously important to the Master because the Master was protecting it the entire time. And just like Dracula, as soon as the ship lands, or right before it lands, he consumes the entire crew and passengers, and basically leads them as little seeds of his spawn that he sends out into New York in this case to cause mischief. And I think it's pretty cool that we're getting both sides of the vampire in this Del Toro vampire universe. We're not just getting Walking Dead, viral zombies. We're not just getting modern day kind of vampires. We're getting a weird mix of the traditional and the original, the traditional and the new.
Okay.
One thing I would want to bring up, if we're moving on from characters, I think James kind of brought it before. We saw a bit more of like the victims or like the carriers. So let's talk a bit about like the signs and the symptoms that they're kind of hinting at. I mean, one interesting thing that they've kind of shown a couple times in this episode is that you start losing your hair.
Right.
I guess. I kind of going back to that old style, very ugly, very monster-like vampires. I guess when you see the Master, like the bit you see behind his head when he takes off his cloak, you can see he's completely bald. So I guess you sort of get a little tease about like what the full form's going to be. But actually, one of my other favorite scenes in regards to that is when the goth punk rocker starts licking the blood off the floor.
Oh, that was
really creepy and really awesome.
Yeah. There's a lot of like scenes where you could see people like falling. I mean, that's why we have the 4 or whatever survivors, because you could see them like how horrible it is to turn into one of these things. There's no sparkling in this, as everyone's been talking.
I like the bald too, because it's kind of like, at least for me, cinematically, it reminds me kind of like the Nosferatu, kind of like vampires as like monsters, not as like vampires, kind of like sexy vampires, as we're getting a lot today. Right. We also got, as far as symptoms, we got high temperatures and headaches, right? And then, as Matt said, the losing the hair, and then obviously, sucking blood.
Yeah, and the fact that they've got parasites living within them that are apparently hard to identify. Oh, a couple things, like the slit on the throat, which is just a rehash of the 2 puncture marks in the neck. You think about it. But like that's a little ridiculous. We can't divorce puncture marks on the neck without being somewhat cartoony. So the little slit is horrific in a way, just being drained out from that little slit in your throat, or even managing to survive with it and it just heals over quickly. That's pretty gross. And the little worms that show up under your UV light when you that's pretty horrific. There's a lot of disturbing scenes that happen, which is pretty impressive considering the fact that it's not on like, subscriber cable. It's basic cable.
Well, They can do what they want. I mean, cable is self-regulated at this point, you know.
Right, but they're on a channel that self-regulates so that they won't show horrific things typically. And this show
I don't know.
is doing it.
Honestly, I don't know. I used to watch Nip Tuck. There were a lot of butt shots on that show.
That's not horrific. The human butt is beautiful. That. Yeah, I like. There's a couple other like vampire. Not only the boldness for Nosferatu and the bites on the neck and then not crossing running water. There's a couple other little hints here and there about what. Like the traditional vampirism, you basically can see how Del Toro, or whoever else wrote this, kind of sat down with like an ancient vampire book or like a book on myths and just said, all right, how do we make any of this make sense? Which I appreciate. I think it's kind of neat that they put that effort in.
Well, I mean, you also get that scene with the two survivors in the restaurant. And you get the classic, these vampires are pale because they're sick. You get that very white, waxy kind of complexion too on top of it, which is a little tip of the hat as well.
Right.
And also, I mean, I'm not sure if this is really calling back to anything, but like the sound that they hear in their head. I know one of them's like a voice in their head. I mean, it's something calling back to like hearing the call of the master or something like that, which they pretty much outright said, like, I hear a voice almost. Well, I think that's also the thing with vampires, like the spawn.
Yeah, the pull of the master's word. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird because I feel like this might have something to do with it, but I'm speculating. I feel like there's a difference kind of between the two quote unquote types of vampires we've seen. We've seen kind of like these dead zombified versions, and then we've seen these kind of like smarter, more thinking kind of people, particularly with the people that are changing. I'm wondering if maybe hearing the voice or hearing the master's call kind of means you're chosen as compared to just being some sort of like infected thing.
There are stages. There's the ghoulish kind of barely sentient zombie kinds, the ones who were dead and then came back. There's obviously the master. There's Ekaron or whatever, who seems to be like an ancient of some sort, but even though he obeys the master. And then there's all those survivors and what happened to them. It's going to be interesting to see this show build its mythology, and I'm going to end it. We should end the hangout with that. What you want to see from the show? I know it's only the third episode, but I'm hoping that we build up on the vampire mythology. I think there's something really attractive of seeing a interesting like a genre mythology build out, so that your players can run within it and do interesting things within the genre. To kind of use like a game terminology, you build a really interesting setting and then have characters go crazy in it. That's what I want to see more than anything else. What about you guys?
Do you want to
go ahead, James. Go ahead, James.
I think one of the things I really liked about the first episode is very cinematically like beautiful, and I was worried. I kind of felt myself losing a little bit of that in the middle of the episode, and then we kind of hit the end with the girl and her father in the bathtub, and that scene was just like gorgeous looking, despite the fact that it was a little horrifying. So I want to see a little more of that, like don't forget like the fun kind of cinematic stuff that really like having a name like Del Toro on the series can bring to it. So I'm hoping we get to see a little more of that. Also, I want more of the meta plot, and the mythology that Frank said, but I felt it was weird to take his answer after he said it.
Haha.
Yeah, no, I was going to agree with both of you, actually. I think we need more of the backstory of the evil organization and where it all came from, and then find out more about how Abraham fits into all of it.
Mine hope is kind of weird for me personally, since I'm usually as far from a horror guy as possible. I'm looking forward to the most is more vampire horror kind of scares, because I feel like that's those scenes seem to be one of the most the best parts of the show so far, and so like I really hope they keep that stride. Show just really does the gross and like the creepiness factor. I find it kind of compelling, even though like it's usually not my cup of tea at all. But just something about it, I can't turn away from it. And from what I hear from people that have followed this story, like I won't be disappointed. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, good. And I'm going to have to keep going back to this. While I didn't like kind of where these characters started, like it felt a little awkward how their backstories got set up, I do recognize that for this show to get big and popular, it needs to have characters that people care about. And right now, Abraham's close. F maybe he's not a lost cause, but some good writer out there come in and give us something to latch onto these characters so they become the Don Drapers, the Walter Whites, the characters that you actually care about. Even the Agent Coulsons, people you actually care about. There's a lot of the critique we got from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the first few episodes. Who cares about Skye? Now I feel like people do. I think this show will hopefully get its ground underneath it eventually. Tonight's episode, episode 3, Gone Smooth. So maybe we're going to have a lot more bold people. Little Nosferatus walking around. Power to the people. All right, guys, thanks for joining me in tonight's Hangout. I hope you out there in YouTube land enjoyed it, our half-hour recap. Stay tuned. In about a half hour, you'll be able to see a live episode of The Strain, and join us every Sunday at 9 for our recap. And if you'd like to contribute, please send us a message with your minds. We can hear it faintly in the background all the time. It's very unsettling. Good night, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Hey, everybody wave, say goodbye.
Bye.
Yay.